The walk-in freezer was the only place in the restaurant where I could fall apart unseen. I stood shivering in my thin server's uniform, fingers pressed to my eyes to stem the flow of tears. "Keep it together, Grace," I told myself. But my body betrayed me with quiet sobs I couldn't contain. The roar of the industrial fans drowned out the noise. At least no one could hear me breaking. It had been a nightmare dinner rush at La Stella, the upscale Italian restaurant in Manhattan where I worked. Friday nights always brought a demanding crowd. Wall Street types celebrating deals, elegant couples on anniversaries, tourists splurging on a taste of the high life. I had handled it all before. But tonight was different. Tonight I was unraveling. The text message that flashed on my phone an hour ago still burned in my memory. Rent overdue 3 days. Pay up or you're out. As if I could conjure $1,500 out of thin air. My hands trembled remembering the follow-up from my landlord Gary. A leering suggestion that there were other ways I could cover what I owed. I'd felt sick reading it, then furious, then utterly helpless. Gary was also my shift manager, the man who controlled my schedule, and at the moment whether I'd have a roof over my head next week. When I'd tried to laugh off his insinuation earlier in the week, he'd leaned in too close and whispered, "Think about it, or start packing." The heat of his breath and the squeeze of his hand on my shoulder had lingered like grime on my skin. I could almost hear his oily voice. "Poor Grace. Don't you know life could be easier if you just cooperate?" A surge of anger cut through my fear. I'd worked at La Stella for 2 years, and I'd earned every dollar honestly. No way was I selling myself to pay rent or keep this job, but righteous anger wouldn't change the fact that I had no money and no family I could ask for help. My mom was halfway across the country in Ohio, barely making ends meet herself. My college friends had drifted away when I'd had to drop out last year. Bills from Dad's hospital stay ate through the tuition fund, and after he passed, I couldn't keep up with school and an apartment on a waitress's wages. At 24, this job was all I had, and losing it would mean losing everything. I straightened my spine and wiped my face with the hem of my apron. The small mirror on the freezer door reflected my blotchy cheeks and red-rimmed eyes. My dark brown hair, usually neat in a ponytail, had frizzed loose around my face in the humidity of the kitchen. I looked how I felt, fragile, desperate, exhausted. Not a great look for the front of house of a fine dining restaurant. I splashed a bit of cold water from a prep sink onto my face and patted it dry, then pinched my cheeks for color. The last thing I needed was a customer complaining that their server looked like a mess. When I stepped out of the freezer, the comparative warmth of the kitchen wrapped around me, along with the smell of tomato sauce and searing steak. My watch read 9:30 p.m. Only a handful of tables remained occupied out in the dining room. The worst of the night was over. Maybe I could finish the shift quietly and avoid Gary until I figured out a plan. As I headed for the swinging door back out to the floor, I nearly collided with Marisol, one of the other servers, who was balancing a tray of cannoli. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Whoa, Chica, you okay?" she asked, taking in my face. I must not have hidden the evidence of crying as well as I'd hoped. "Fine," I lied with a tight smile. "Just needed a minute to cool off." Marisol's expression flickered with sympathy. She lowered her voice, though the kitchen noise likely masked our conversation anyway. "He was at it again, wasn't he? I saw Gary following you earlier. Did he say something nasty?" I swallowed, my throat still tight. "It's nothing I can't handle," I replied, which wasn't really an answer. We both knew Gary had a reputation. He hadn't crossed a clear line with me yet, just heavy insinuations and those unwelcome touches that made my skin crawl. But others hadn't been so lucky. Marisol herself had once endured him, accidentally, brushing against her rear so many times in one shift that she'd fled to the bathroom to scream. But she needed the job as badly as I did. Reporting him felt futile. The owner of La Stella was an absentee figure, and complaints always filtered back to Gary himself. It was a vicious loop. Marisol gave me a searching look. "If you want, I can cover your last table so you can head home early." Before I could respond, the kitchen door swung open, and as if conjured by our thoughts, Gary stepped in. His bulk filled the doorway, and his eyes zeroed in on me with that mixture of annoyance and presumptuous entitlement I'd come to dread. "Grace!" he snapped, ignoring Marisol entirely. "Table 7 needs clearing. Quit hiding in the back. We aren't paying you to lounge around." My cheeks burned, shame and anger sparking again under my skin. "We aren't paying you," like the money came from his pocket. He paid me barely more than minimum wage, and I earned every cent taking care of customers while he schmoozed or barked orders. But I bit my tongue. Arguing would only make things worse later when no one was around to see. "Yes, sir," I mumbled, eyes down, and hurried past him. I felt his gaze linger on me as I went, like the touch of a clammy hand across my back. Just get through tonight, I thought. Tomorrow, figure something out. I stepped out into the main dining area, glad to escape his presence. The restaurant had settled into a post-dinner lull. Soft jazz music played over the speakers, and the lights were dimmed to a gentle amber glow. Only a few tables were occupied now. My heart still pounded from the close call in the kitchen, but I forced myself to focus. Table 7, near the broad front windows, was empty save for dirty plates and crumpled napkins. I grabbed a bussing tray and started clearing it. Each clink of dishes against the tray was oddly soothing, a small, normal task I could control. One plate, one glass, one napkin at a time. My breathing slowed to match the rhythm of cleaning. I didn't realize someone had approached until I sensed a figure standing on the other side of the table. I looked up, plate in hand, and my breath caught. A man I had never seen before stood there, watching me. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with a charcoal suit tailored so sharply it looked like it had been sewn onto him. Under the jacket, a crisp white shirt was unbuttoned at the throat, where I glimpsed a thin gold chain against tan skin. He had the kind of face you couldn't forget. Strong, arresting features as if carved from stone, softened only slightly by the warm overhead lighting. His hair was a rich black, smoothly swept back from his forehead. But it was his eyes that held me. Dark, penetrating, and at that moment, quietly concerned. I realized I was staring. Worse, that he was examining me with a furrow between his brows, as if something about me troubled him. In a flash of self-consciousness, I wondered what I looked like to him. A waitress with puffy eyes, clutching dirty dishes with white-knuckled hands. "I'm sorry, sir," I managed, forcing a polite smile as I set the plate down on the tray. "I'll have your table cleared in just a moment." He continued to regard me, and I noticed now that he wasn't alone. Another man, also in a dark suit, stood a respectful distance behind him, watchful, like security. Something about their posture and quiet confidence made me suddenly aware that this wasn't a regular customer checking on his table. Indeed, out of the corner of my eye, I caught Marisol by the kitchen door, looking our way with an expression of mingled apprehension and awe. Her gaze caught mine, and she mouthed, "That's him." I didn't know what she meant, but my stomach did a small flip. The man with the dark eyes glanced over the disarray on table 7, then back to me. "No rush," he said, voice low and unexpectedly gentle. "Please, take your time." I blinked. Most customers at this hour were either drunk and jovial or impatient to leave. This man was neither. If anything, he seemed concerned for me. But that made no sense. We were strangers. "Thank you," I murmured, not sure what else to say. I stacked the last of the glasses onto my tray. When I straightened, I realized he was offering me something. A linen handkerchief, pristine white with embroidered edges. "You missed a spot," he said softly, and touched his own cheek to indicate mine. Mortified, I realized a tear track I hadn't wiped must still be visible on my face. I hadn't expected kindness, much less from a stranger. For a second I hesitated. Up close, his presence was even more imposing. He carried an air of authority that made the space around him feel charged. Yet nothing in his demeanor was threatening. If anything, it was the opposite. Steady and composed, as if he had all the time in the world to wait for me to accept the simple offer of a handkerchief. "Thank you," I said again, my voice barely above a whisper. I took the handkerchief and dabbed it against my cheek. A faint scent of clean soap and something like cedar clung to the fabric. It struck me that this might be the most absurd use of an expensive accessory, soaking up a waitress's tears. He nodded once, a courteous dip of his chin. "Of course." For a moment, we just stood there in the soft light, the clinking of silverware and murmur of other diners fading into the background. There was an intensity in his dark gaze that made me feel exposed, as if he could see every worry and humiliation I'd endured tonight written plainly on my face. I dropped my eyes, flushing, and busied myself with lifting the loaded bussing tray. The man stepped smoothly out of my way to let me pass. "Have someone help you with that," he said, an observation more than an order, in a tone that suggested he wasn't used to being refused. My knees wobbled slightly under the weight of the tray. It was true I was overtired and had overloaded it. "I'm fine," I insisted on reflex, adjusting my grip. "But thank you, really." A ghost of a frown tugged at the corner of his mouth. He seemed about to say something else when suddenly Gary's voice cut across the dining room. "Grace!" Gary barked from near the bar. The sound made me flinch, nearly upsetting the tray. I steadied it and looked over. Gary was watching with sharp, narrowed eyes. "Quit dawdling and get moving." His tone was all business in front of guests, but the scowl on his ruddy face promised I'd hear about this later. Heat flooded my cheeks again, a toxic mix of embarrassment and fear. The man beside me turned his head slightly in Gary's direction. His expression didn't change, but I sensed a shift. A quiet, controlled irritation, like a ripple across still water. Gary seemed to notice the tall stranger for the first time, and blanched, his mouth snapping shut. That was puzzling. I'd never seen Gary at a loss for words when scolding an employee, but the manager quickly recovered, smearing on a placating smile as he approached us. "Mr. Lombardi," he said, bobbing his head. "I didn't realize you'd arrived. Welcome." Mr. Lombardi. I realized with a jolt who must be standing next to me. Matteo Lombardi, the restaurant's owner. I'd never seen him before. He rarely visited in person, preferring to let his managers run day-to-day operations, but his name was whispered with a mix of reverence and fear around here, usually when corporate memos came down or when expensive renovations were done overnight without explanation. The stories among staff painted him as some kind of wealthy phantom, who could appear without warning and end careers with a single word. And here I was, standing beside him, using his handkerchief to dry my foolish tears. "My apologies if our service has been less than excellent, sir," Gary went on in an ingratiating tone. He shot me a warning glance, then quickly returned to fawning over the boss. "We didn't expect you tonight. If I'd known, I would have arranged a proper welcome." Matteo Lombardi barely spared Gary a glance. "The service has been fine," he said coolly, "though I am concerned that my staff are apparently not allowed to breathe between tasks." The mild words made Gary flinch as if slapped. I stood, frozen, not sure if I should slip away. Matteo spoke again before I could, his tone icy polite. "I think it would be best if you give Grace and me a moment. We need to discuss—" He paused, and I felt his gaze on me again. Her schedule. My schedule. I looked at him in confusion. Gary looked between us, uncertain, but he knew better than to argue. "Yes, sir," he muttered. His eyes flicked to me with hatred barely concealed behind a thin smile. "I'll just go check on the kitchen." With that, he scurried off, leaving me alone with the owner. I opened my mouth, an apology or maybe a thanks on my tongue, but Matteo spoke first. "Why have I never seen you here before, Grace?" Hearing my name in his mouth startled me. He must have picked it up from Gary's ranting, but the way he said it, soft, like it mattered, sent a strange warmth through me. I usually work earlier shifts," I managed, "and I think this is the first time you've been in while I was on." He nodded as if that made sense. His eyes traveled over me assessingly, not in a lewd way, but like he was cataloging details. My still flushed face, the way I was holding the heavy tray. Still in my arms, I realized with a small grimace. "Let's set this down, he said, relieving me of the tray before I could protest. He placed it on a nearby side station with ease. I noticed how gently he took it, careful not to brush against me more than necessary. My shoulders ached with released tension. "Thank you," I said. My heart was hammering, part residual embarrassment, part nerves at being face to face with the boss I'd heard so much about, and part something else I couldn't name. He made me nervous, but not in the way Gary did, more in the way of standing at the edge of a cliff, a sense that one step closer to him could send me plummeting into depths I couldn't predict. He slid his hands into his pockets, regarding me thoughtfully. "How long have you worked for me, Grace?" 2 years, sir." A hint of a wry smile touched his lips. "Sir, makes me sound old. I'm 34 for the record." I bit my lip. "Mr. Lombardi, then." I didn't dare use his first name. He might not appreciate that familiarity. He inclined his head, accepting that. 2 years. "And do you enjoy the work?" The question caught me off guard. No owner had ever asked me if I enjoyed scraping plates and fetching drinks. I decided honesty within reason was best. "I enjoy parts of it. I like making customers happy, having regulars, the pace of a busy night. It can be satisfying." He noted my careful phrasing. "But," I hesitated, then figured there was little to lose. "After tonight, Gary might well fire me anyway. But it can be a lot. Late hours, difficult customers, juggling classes." I trailed off, realizing I'd mentioned classes. I wasn't even in school now, though I desperately wanted to go back if I could ever save enough. Mateo's brow lifted slightly. Classes? I swallowed. I was taking college courses part-time. Had to pause this semester. His expression didn't show pity exactly. Something more like understanding. I see. He leaned a fraction closer, lowering his voice. Forgive me if I'm overstepping, but I couldn't help noticing you were upset earlier. If there's something wrong in my restaurant, I need to know. My stomach flipped. He must have seen me in the freezer or the aftermath of it. Immediately my defenses went up. If I told him the truth about Gary, it would be my word versus my manager's. Gary, who likely had the owner's ear far more than a lowly waitress did. And if I was wrong about Mateo's intentions, complaining about a manager could backfire terribly. I'd seen it happen to a bartender here once. She raised a stink about how things were run, and suddenly her shifts were cut to nothing. I forced a smile that tasted bitter on my tongue. It's nothing, really. Just a personal matter, Mr. Lombardi. His dark eyes narrowed just a bit, as if he could sense the half-truth. Are you sure? He pressed gently. I don't mean to pry into your life, Grace, but I value my employees. If someone or something is causing a problem here at work... He let the sentence hang. My heart thudded. Did he suspect Gary? Had he overheard more than I realized? Gary did storm in rather loud, but Mateo waited calmly. No impatience. Only that unwavering attention that made me feel like he truly cared about my answer. In that moment, the temptation to unload everything nearly overwhelmed me. To say, yes, your manager is an awful creep who is extorting and harassing me. To let someone stronger and more powerful handle it, just for once. My eyes stung, and I had to look away toward the window, where rain had begun to patter against the glass, tiny drops reflecting the streetlights of Midtown. I began quietly, picking at a loose thread on my apron. But the words died in my throat. Fear reared its head. Fear of not being believed, or worse, being believed, and still facing retaliation. Gary had hinted at consequences if I made noise. And what proof did I have? A few gross texts that he could claim were jokes or misinterpreted. My word against his about his touches and threats. Mateo waited, patient but intent. His presence felt steadying somehow, like a wall I could lean on if I chose. But trust was something I couldn't afford easily. Not after the years of watching my father charm the outside world and break our home in private, leaving me distrustful of men in authority. Not after the landlord before Gary, who had upped my rent by 20% overnight, just because he knew I had nowhere else to go. The world had taught me that powerful men looked out for themselves first. I must have taken too long to answer. Mateo's expression gentled. All right, he said softly. I won't push you, Grace, but if you need help. He reached into his inner suit pocket and withdrew a small card. He handed it to me. This is my direct number. You can call, anytime for any reason. Understand? I stared at the card in my hand. It was thick, expensive stock, engraved with his name and a phone number, nothing else. The gesture was generous and surprising. I closed my fingers around it as if it might vanish. Thank you, I murmured, meeting his gaze. I appreciate it. He gave a single nod. For a moment, something unspoken passed between us. In his eyes, I thought I saw a flicker of an emotion I couldn't name. Something protective, perhaps. It made my breath catch. Then he straightened, businesslike. I'm going to have dinner now, and I expect you to take a short break, get a cup of water, and compose yourself, yes? A protest sprang to my lips. Staff weren't supposed to take breaks this late unless absolutely necessary. But the faint hint of a smile on Mateo's lips told me he knew exactly that. This was not a request to be argued with. Yes, Mr. Lombardi, I said, a bit of shock still coloring my tone. His smile reached his eyes now, a subtle warmth. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. And with that, he stepped away, giving me one last lingering look before he returned to the booth at the far corner, where two other men in suits had quietly appeared to join him. I realized I'd been holding my breath and let it out in a shaky exhale. The entire exchange felt oddly unreal, like a dream that had briefly crossed into my otherwise drab reality. I touched the crisp business card in my hand, and then tucked it safely into my apron pocket alongside his handkerchief, which I'd absent-mindedly kept clutched in my fingers. Across the room, I could see Gary hovering near the bar, watching Mateo with a mix of apprehension and rage in his eyes. He hadn't heard our words, but he knew I'd just had the owner's ear and attention in a way he never had. My stomach did a nervous flip. Whatever fragile shelter I'd found in Mateo's kindness, Gary would make sure I paid for it once the boss was gone. Just get through tonight, I reminded myself again. But for the first time in a while, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd thought an hour ago. I poured myself a quick glass of ice water and drank it in the server's nook, feeling Mateo's dark-eyed gaze occasionally flick in my direction from his corner table. True to his word, he didn't ask for anything special, just a simple meal, which Marisol hurried to serve, giving me space. Maybe he sensed I couldn't face waiting on him directly, not with my emotions still raw. I was grateful for that silent understanding. Finally, 10:30 rolled around and the last customers departed. Gary kept his distance, busying himself with paperwork at the host stand, but I felt the tension coiling in the air. I helped Marisol carry the last chairs onto tables and wipe them down. The dishwasher clattered in the kitchen. Chef had long since gone, leaving cleanup to his crew. Matteo Lombardi remained at his table even after his companions left. He sipped an espresso, seemingly unhurried as we closed up around him. It was unusual for any owner to stay this late, let alone in the quiet gloom of an empty dining room. I tried not to notice how he cut a striking figure amid the vacant tables, like the king of an empty castle, surveying his domain in solitude. My plan was to clock out as soon as possible and slip away, but as I came out from the kitchen with my coat and purse, I nearly ran smack into Gary in the hallway by the manager's office. "Going somewhere?" he asked, voice low. Gone was any pretense of workplace cordiality. His small, piggish eyes were alight with anger. My pulse jumped. "Home," I said, trying to step around him. "My shift is over." Gary moved, blocking the narrow hallway that led toward the back exit. His bulk loomed over me, the stale scent of his sweat and cologne making my stomach turn. "Not so fast," he hissed. "Think I didn't see you cozying up to the owner? What lies did you tell him, huh?" My heart began to thud painfully. "I didn't tell him anything," I said quickly. "We just talked about my schedule." "Bull!" Gary's lip curled. "You think I'm stupid? That I don't know a snake when I see one? You were crying all through dinner service, and then next thing I know, you're chumming up to Lombardi. What did you say?" Nothing. I swear," I insisted. My eyes darted toward the dining room entrance. I could still see Matteo out there in my peripheral vision, his back to us for the moment. If I shouted, would he hear? I didn't want to find out. I didn't want a scene. Gary jabbed a finger into my shoulder, pushing me back against the wall. "Listen to me, you little tease," he growled. "Men like Lombardi, they eat girls like you for breakfast and forget you by lunch. If you're trying to use him to weasel out of what you owe me, you're making a big mistake." My blood ran cold. This was a level of menace I'd not heard from him before. Despite the sweat beading on his forehead, he spoke with a quiet certainty. I realized I might have underestimated how dangerous a man like Gary could be when cornered. "Please let me go," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to keep it steady. "I just want to go home." Gary leaned closer, his face inches from mine. My skin crawled. "We had an agreement. Rent by tomorrow, or you pay in other ways. That hasn't changed, if anything. Tonight made your situation worse." "What do you mean?" I stammered. He sneered. "I mean, if I lose my job because you cried to Lombardi, you'll lose a hell of a lot more. I know people, Grace. You won't be safe even if you walk out of here tonight with his blessing." My blood froze. This was no longer just workplace bullying. This felt like a genuine threat on my safety. Gary's teeth were bared in an ugly grin, and the fluorescent light overhead cast deep shadows under his brow that made him look almost feral. I tried to collect myself. "Gary, I didn't say anything, okay? I didn't." My eyes were pleading now. "Nothing's changed. I'll get you the money. Somehow, some way." His gaze flickered, searching my face for truth. I had the grim satisfaction of seeing a hint of uncertainty there. "Tomorrow," he demanded. "Bring me something, at least half, or... Is there a problem here?" The voice was calm, but it cut through the charged silence of the hallway like a knife. Both Gary and I turned to see Matteo Lombardi standing at the end of the corridor, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his phone. His expression was unreadable, but those dark eyes of his missed nothing. Gary immediately stepped back, his hand dropping from where it had pinned my shoulder. My heart leapt into my throat. How much had Matteo heard? "No problem, sir," Gary said, slick and nervous. The change in his tone was instant and obsequious. "I was just discussing some scheduling matters with Grace." I pressed myself against the wall, trying to compose my face. My shoulder throbbed where Gary's finger had dug in. Matteo's gaze flicked to me, and I saw a storm brewing beneath his otherwise cool demeanor. He must have caught the tail end of Gary's threat, if not more. Mateo slipped his phone into his pocket and walked toward us, unhurried. Gary actually shrank a little as the owner approached. The hall was narrow, and when Mateo reached us, he placed himself deliberately between me and Gary, facing my manager with a pleasant smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Gary, I think I'll finish up the lockup myself tonight," Mateo said. "You've had a long day, haven't you?" Gary blinked. "Oh, it's no trouble. I insist." The two words were softly spoken, but had the weight of an order. "Hand me the keys, please." It was like watching a mouse realize it's cornered by a cat. Gary hesitated only a second before fishing the ring of keys from his pocket and handing them over. "Of course, sir," he mumbled. "If you're sure." "I'm very sure," Mateo said. He pocketed the keys. "You're dismissed for the night. We can discuss everything else on Monday." Gary's face reddened. "Yes, sir. Have a good night." He gave me a parting glare full of daggers, then squeezed past us and hurried out toward the main exit. I heard the door whoosh open and shut as he left into the rainy night. Suddenly, all the strength drained from my legs. I hadn't realized how tense every muscle had been until the moment I knew Gary was gone. I sagged back against the wall, closing my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. "Grace." The way Mateo said my name was so gentle, it almost undid me. I felt his hand hover near my arm, not quite touching. "Look at me." I did, and found his face closer than expected. He had bent slightly to be at my eye level, concern evident in the tightness around his eyes. "What did he do?" he asked, voice low and surprisingly tender. It was a tone that implied he already suspected, but needed to hear it from me. I shook my head, tears threatening again, after all that effort to hold them back. "It's nothing." Mateo exhaled slowly, as if reining in some inner turmoil. "Grace, please. I heard him mention you owed him and something about not being safe." His jaw clenched for an instant. "If he hurt you or threatened you, I need to know." His earnestness washed over me like a balm, loosening the vice grip my fear had on my throat. Why was it so easy to believe he actually cared? But I saw no guile in his expression, only steady outrage on my behalf and a patient resolve to get answers. A shaky breath escaped me. "I'm late on rent," I managed, my voice faltering. "Gary is my landlord as well, for the building upstairs. He said if I couldn't pay, that I'd owe him in other ways." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. He implied if I slept with him, he'd forgive the rent. And if I didn't, I'd be evicted. I broke off, anger and humiliation warring inside me as I confessed. Mateo's hand, which had been hovering, very lightly alighted on my forearm. A comforting touch that sent warmth radiating up from the contact. I didn't flinch. His touch was steady, supportive, utterly different from Gary's grubby pawing. He'd been hinting at it for weeks, I continued, voice hushed. Tonight he basically gave me an ultimatum. I was crying in the freezer earlier because I didn't know what to do. My eyes flickered down, unable to meet his gaze. "When you found me at that table, I was a mess." Mateo's fingers curled slightly around my arm. "You were not a mess," he said, a quiet intensity in each word. "You were in a bad situation not of your making." I let out a breath that was almost a laugh, bitter and sad. "I didn't tell you because I was scared. If you confronted him and didn't believe me or couldn't do anything, he'd retaliate. I guess he did anyway, once he assumed I'd snitched." Something like regret flashed in Mateo's eyes. "I should have known," he murmured. "I saw you coming out of the freezer and your eyes." "Forgive me. I tried to give you the chance to speak, but I should have looked closer sooner." The idea that this powerful man was apologizing to me felt wrong. I shook my head quickly. "You couldn't have known. I barely hinted at anything." His hand on my arm slid down, gently encircling my wrist. He raised it slightly, his thumb grazing the skin as if checking for injury. "Did he grab you? Are you hurt?" My wrist felt fine, but my shoulder... I rolled it gingerly. "My shoulder's a little sore. He jabbed me pretty hard, but I'm okay." Mateo's eyes darkened, anger simmering beneath his controlled exterior. "I heard enough to know he was threatening you." I nodded, voice small. He said even if I left here, I wouldn't be safe. That he knew people who could hurt me if he lost his job because of me. Saying it aloud made me shudder. The threat had sounded so real. And with him as my landlord, it wasn't just work. He knew where I lived. A muscle in Mateo's jaw ticked. For a long moment he was silent, I could feel under his composed surface something lethal was held tight on a leash. It should have scared me, but I realized with some surprise that I didn't fear him. His anger wasn't directed at me. It was for me on my behalf. The distinction was stark and important. After a tense silence, he spoke in a low rasp. "He won't hurt you. Not on my watch." The conviction in his tone made me release a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I realized he was still lightly holding my wrist, and I found comfort in that solid, gentle contact. "Thank you," I whispered. Those words felt inadequate for the flood of gratitude and relief coursing through me, but I hoped he understood. Mateo nodded once, then carefully let go of my wrist, as if aware only now that he'd held it. "Do you have somewhere you can go for the weekend?" he asked. "A friend or family member's place?" I hesitated. "No, not really," I admitted. Marisol had a studio with a roommate. My mother was states away, and I wouldn't drag them into this mess anyway. His brow furrowed. "All right, then you'll come with me." I must have looked startled, because he quickly added, "I have a guest suite in one of my buildings. It's secure and comfortable. You can rest there while I sort this out. I promise you'll be safe. Go with him?" My mind raced. It sounded drastic, but then I pictured myself alone tonight in my apartment, jumping at every noise, wondering if Gary would try to get in or send someone. I realized I was truly afraid to go back there, at least until I could change the locks or something, which I couldn't exactly afford to do. But could I trust Mateo, a man I'd met only hours ago? He was essentially my boss, though he felt like much more in these intense moments. Common sense urged caution. Yet, his eyes held a sincerity that eroded my doubts. If he meant me harm, he wouldn't have intervened like this. And there was something else. Beneath the outrage and concern, I saw an understanding in him. As if some part of him had lived a similar moment of fear or helplessness in the past. I found myself nodding slowly. Okay. Some tension left his shoulders, as though he had half expected me to refuse. Good. Let's get out of here. He guided me back into the dining room and over to the main doors. The rain was coming down harder outside, audible against the glass front. I paused. "My umbrella and boots are in my locker." Mateo waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that now. I'll have someone retrieve your things tomorrow." Tomorrow. It hit me that I wouldn't be sleeping in my own bed tonight. A small price for safety, I reminded myself, and hopefully temporary. He opened the door and a gust of cool, wet air blew in. I pulled my light jacket tighter around me instinctively. Before I could protest, Mateo shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. Warmth enveloped me. His body heat still clung to the fine fabric, along with that subtle cedar scent I noticed earlier. I was immediately cocooned in the smell of him, something that felt far too comforting given our acquaintance of mere hours. "You'll catch a cold," he said simply when I began to murmur that he didn't have to do that. I didn't resist. Maybe earlier I would have, but exhaustion and gratitude made me pliant. "Thank you," I said for what felt like the 100th time. He offered a faint smile and placed a guiding hand just above my lower back, an almost hovering touch, not quite touching me, like he was careful not to startle or presume. Together we stepped out into the night. A black car idled at the curb, shiny under the rain. A man in a driver's uniform hopped out as we approached and hurried to open the rear door for us. He eyed me curiously for a second. I'm sure I looked a sight, wrapped in an expensive suit jacket 2 sizes too big, but he kept his questions to himself. Mateo helped me into the back seat, then slid in beside me. The door shut, muffling the sound of the rain. In the close quarters of the car, I became hyper-aware of a few things all at once. That I was shaking. Adrenaline crash, and the chill from my damp clothes combining. That my shoulder hurt more than I'd let on. And that Matteo Lombardi was sitting less than a foot away. His presence filling the space with a quiet energy that made it hard to think straight. He must have noticed the trembling, because he immediately instructed the driver, "Carlo, turn up the heat, please." As the car pulled away from the curb, warmth slowly began to seep back into my fingers. I realized I was still clutching my purse in a death grip on my lap. My knuckles were white around the strap. "It's all right," Matteo said softly. "You're safe now." Safe. The word made me sag back against the leather seat. I tilted my head to the side and caught his expression in the passing glow of streetlights. He looked forward, jaw tight, lost in thought, but one of his hands was balled into a fist on his knee. I remembered that fury I'd glimpsed, and it struck me that he was likely still restraining it, for my sake. He noticed me watching and forced his fingers to uncurl. When he spoke again, his tone was calm. "We'll go to one of my properties in Midtown. It has security on site around the clock." "You really think he might try something tonight?" I asked, hating the quaver in my voice. "Gary, I mean." "Let's just say I don't take chances," Mateo replied. "If he's desperate and angry, who knows what stupidity he might indulge in. By morning, I'll have more permanent measures in place." I wondered what permanent measures meant in Mateo's world. Something about how he said it made a shiver run along my spine. Not fear of him, but a dark curiosity. We fell silent for a few minutes. The car's interior was dim, lit only by the city lights streaking past outside. As my heart rate finally slowed, a wave of fatigue crashed over me. So much had happened in such a short span. I felt wrung out. "Mateo?" I ventured quietly, trying his first name on my tongue. He turned his head toward me. "Yes," my words caught. I wanted to ask him why he was doing all this, why he cared. But that sounded ungrateful or suspicious. So instead, I settled on something more practical. What will happen to the restaurant now? And my job? My voice was small. As much as I hated the circumstances, I couldn't afford to be unemployed if he decided to fire Gary and shut down for a while or something. He considered me, and I sensed he recognized the real question under mine. What will happen to me? "The restaurant will be fine," he said carefully. "Gary." His lips pressed into a line. "He will not be managing it anymore, that I can promise. There's an assistant manager who can handle things temporarily until I put someone new in place." I nodded, relieved at least to hear Gary wouldn't be there if I returned. "And me?" His eyes softened. "You still work for me if you want to, Grace. Though after what you've been through, I'd understand if you don't want to step foot back there for a while. We can arrange a leave with pay, whatever you need." I was taken aback by his generosity. I can't ask for that. You're not asking. I'm offering." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I said once more. It seemed all I could say. He gave a slight shake of his head, almost frustrated, but not at me. "You don't have to keep thanking me. What happened to you should never have been allowed. I'm only making it right." His sense of responsibility was astounding. There was a firmness to his words, like he truly believed it was his duty to fix this. A thought occurred to me. Has something like this happened before? With other employees? I hope not. But if Gary had a pattern, it couldn't have been entirely invisible. Mateo sighed, looking out the window for a moment. "Not to my knowledge, and I make it my business to know. I have zero tolerance for harassment in my establishments. If I'd gotten even a hint, I would have handled it." His fingers drummed lightly on his thigh. I suspect Gary was clever in his cruelty, picking targets too afraid to speak. "Until you." I shivered, thinking of Marisol's knowing looks. Maybe she suspected, but she needed the job too much to risk it. The guilt of that gnawed at me. "There might have been others before me," I admitted. I wasn't the first to get those vibes from him, but none of us dared say anything. Mateo's expression hardened briefly. Then he placed a hand over his heart, in a gesture almost like a pledge. "Then I owe you an even greater apology, Grace. You should have been safe at work. I failed to ensure that." I was stunned. "You can't watch everyone all the time, and Gary was good at hiding it." He looked like he wanted to argue but let it drop, instead asking, "How old are you?" The abrupt personal question made me blink. 24, why? He shook his head slightly. "Just thinking out loud. You're 24, trying to pay rent and go to school, dealing with all that. You remind me of someone I knew." Before I could ask who, the car slowed. "We're here, sir," the driver announced. I peered out and saw we had pulled into the private underground garage of a tall building. The area looked upscale, a doorman building near Central Park, if I had to guess from the glimpse of trees as we turned in. The driver parked and opened our doors. Mateo exited first and held out a hand to help me step out. My legs were stiff and a bit wobbly, but I managed. He led me to a private elevator. I expected him to punch in a code or a key, but it opened at his touch, biometric maybe, and we stepped inside. With a soft whir, it ascended swiftly. A few seconds later, the doors slid open directly into a spacious apartment. I hesitated on the threshold until Mateo gently urged me forward. "This is my home," he explained. "But you can have the guest room, and there's a lock on the door if that makes you more comfortable." I took a few tentative steps in. The place was gorgeous and surprisingly warm in decor for a wealthy bachelor. The floors were polished wood covered by thick Turkish rugs. Soft lighting illuminated a living room with leather sofas and a wall of windows showcasing a glittering view of the city skyline. It was both luxurious and welcoming. "You live here alone?" I asked, hearing my voice echo slightly in the lofty space. "Yes," he answered, taking the suit jacket from my shoulders and draping it over an armchair. My eyes followed the movement. The shirt beneath clung to his broad shoulders, reminding me that this man had thrown himself between me and danger earlier without hesitation. The memory stirred something in my chest, a mix of gratitude and an uncomfortable flutter of attraction. I shoved the latter aside. It must be the adrenaline and relief making me feel attached to my rescuer. "Please make yourself at home," Matteo said. "You look like you could use a warm shower and rest. I'll see if I can find you something clean to wear. Your uniform—" He glanced at the slight smears of food and sweat on my work shirt, and I flushed, realizing I wasn't exactly fresh. "Sorry," I murmured, self-conscious again. "Don't be. Wait here." He disappeared down a hallway for a minute. I heard a door open and close. Meanwhile, I wandered to the windows. Even in the darkness and rain, New York was alive below. Headlights snaking through avenues, the glow of Times Square reflected off low clouds. It felt surreal to be looking at it from so high, removed from the chaos and struggle down at street level. Matteo returned with a folded black t-shirt and what looked like a pair of drawstring pajama pants. "These might be a bit big on you, but they're clean." I accepted them. "Thank you." The shirt smelled like laundry detergent and a hint of him. Everything here seemed to— He pointed me to the bathroom adjoining the guest bedroom. "There's towels and toiletries. Take your time. If you need anything, I'll be out here." Our eyes met for a brief moment. I wanted to say something more, maybe to try to express what his kindness meant to me, but the words tangled up. In the end, I just gave a small nod and slipped into the guest room, shutting the bathroom door behind me. Alone in the quiet, I finally allowed myself to fully exhale. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, tired, with mascara smudged under hazel eyes that had seen too much stress tonight. But I also saw someone still standing. I saw a spark in my expression that hadn't been there this morning. The knowledge that I wasn't facing all this by myself anymore. It felt like waking from a nightmare into a safe, soft morning light. Under the steaming shower, I let the hot water cascade over my sore shoulder and down my back, washing away the grime and tension of the night. Bruises were forming where Gary had shoved me. I touched the tender spot gingerly, anger flaring again at the audacity of that man. But every time I started to relive that confrontation, I'd think of Matteo stepping in, placing himself calmly in harm's way for me, and the anger gave way to an emotion far more complex and overwhelming. I finished and towel dried, then changed into the clothes he'd given me. As predicted, they were huge. His t-shirt hung past my hips, and I had to roll the waistband of the pajama pants multiple times to keep them up. I looked like a kid in her dad's clothes, but I was warm and clean. Emerging from the bedroom, I found him in the kitchen area, heating milk on the stove. He'd shed his tie and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing strong forearms. On the counter sat a mug and a tin of cocoa. He glanced up and gave a faint smile. "Good timing. I thought you might like something warm to drink." It was such a thoughtful domestic scene that I had to pause. "You're making me hot chocolate." He chuckled softly. "Well, I thought about offering you something stronger, but this seemed a safer bet after everything." I couldn't help it. I smiled, a real one that made my cheeks hurt a little because it had been so long. "Hot chocolate is perfect." A minute later, we were seated in the living room. I tucked my legs under me on the couch, holding the warm mug between my hands like a lifeline. He sat a respectful distance away, one arm draped along the back of the sofa, angled slightly toward me in a relaxed pose that nevertheless radiated attentiveness. We sipped in a comfortable quiet for a few moments. The rich chocolate and warmth soothed me from the inside. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. "Matteo, earlier in the car you said I reminded you of someone. Who?" His gaze had been on the twinkling city lights beyond the window. At my question, he focused on me. His lips tightened a fraction. I worried I'd pried too far. But then he answered, voice thoughtful. "My younger sister, Angela," he said. "She was around your age when she went through some hard times. Money troubles, an abusive boyfriend. She always thought she could handle everything alone, too." His eyes grew distant with memory. I was away on business a lot back then. I didn't see the signs until it was almost too late. I felt a pang of empathy. "What happened?" He exhaled and looked down at his hands. "One night I got a call from the hospital. She'd been beaten pretty badly. Broken ribs, concussion. The guy nearly—" His jaw worked. "I took care of him." The way he said it, flat and cold, left little doubt of what took care might mean. A chill rippled over my skin, but I also understood that protective fury. It was the same energy I'd felt in him tonight. After that, I swore I'd never be blind to those around me again. Mateo continued quietly. Especially not to someone under my own roof or my employ. Seeing you tonight, how you tried to hide your tears, it brought me right back to that feeling of failure that I should have noticed sooner. His candor disarmed me. Without thinking, I reached out and rested my hand on his where it lay on the couch back. You didn't fail, I said softly. You saved me. Tonight could have been so much worse if you hadn't been there. He turned his palm upward under mine, gently clasping my hand. His skin was warm, his grip careful. The gesture was intimate enough that I felt a blush rise, but I didn't pull away. It felt good having his hand holding mine. I'm glad I arrived when I did, he said, a dangerous edge entering his voice. If he had hurt you? His fingers tightened almost imperceptibly. I don't want to think about it. I swallowed. Me neither. The silence that settled then was charged with something new. I became acutely aware of how close we were sitting now. I could see faint stubble on his jaw, the way his dark hair just brushed his collar, and his eyes, so intense and near black in this light, searched mine as if trying to read my thoughts. I suddenly realized I was still lightly holding his hand. Embarrassed, I withdrew mine, sliding it back around my mug which I'd set on the coffee table. His hand stayed where it was for a second, as if feeling the loss of my touch, then lowered to his lap. I cleared my throat, needing to break the tension. What will you do about Gary? Mateo's expression cooled, not at me, but at the thought of Gary. Do you really want to know? I thought about it. A part of me craved justice. Gary deserved to be in jail at the very least. But something about the way Mateo asked made me think his plans weren't exactly to involve the police. Maybe not, I said quietly. Just promise me he won't kill me in my sleep or something. It was meant to be a half joke, but it came out too raw. Mateo's eyes flashed with alarm. Grace, I told you, you're safe. I won't let anyone get near you. I gave a small nod. I did believe him. Maybe I was naive, but my gut trusted this man who had so far been nothing but my protector. He went on. As for Gary, by Monday he'll be out of the picture. Whether that means facing charges for blackmail and assault or something less. Official, I'll decide by morning. I bit my lip. I don't want to cause trouble for you. His low laugh held no humor. Trouble? The trouble is that he put his hands on you in the first place, that he dared to abuse my trust and harm someone under my care. He shook his head. No, you aren't causing trouble, Grace. You're revealing it. And I'm going to stamp it out. The possessive weight of his words, someone under my care, sent an unexpected warmth through me. It should have sounded condescending, but coming from him, it felt like a promise. I realized something then that perhaps I should have earlier. Mateo, that card you gave me, and all of this, you're not just doing this because I'm your employee, are you? It was a bold question, but I had to ask. I needed to understand why he seemed to care so much about a stranger like me. His gaze held mine for a long moment. I saw conflict in his eyes, as if measuring how honest to be. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, hands clasped. When I walked into that restaurant tonight, I was in a foul mood, he said slowly. Business issues, people problems. Frankly, I was just there to ensure my investment was running smoothly and have a meal. I nodded, listening intently. Then I saw you. His voice softened. A young woman trying so damn hard to smile, even with tears barely dried on her cheeks. You looked like you had the weight of the world on you, yet you were still doing your job, still being polite to me. Most people in my life put on an act around me. Fear or respect or flattery. But you were genuine. Even hurting, you tried to stand strong. And when I handed you that handkerchief... He broke off, a hint of a smile touching his lips at the memory. I felt my face heat up. I probably looked ridiculous. No, he said, and his tone brooked no argument. You looked brave and honest. He paused, sitting back slightly. At first I told myself it was just basic decency to check if you were all right. But the more I talked to you, the more I realized it wasn't just that. I found that I cared, on a personal level. Something about you... His words faltered as if he felt he was saying too much. An uncertain expression crossed his face, a flicker of vulnerability that made my heart squeeze. I had to respond, to let him know the feeling wasn't one-sided. I've never had anyone stand up for me like you did, I confessed, my fingers tracing the rim of my mug. I mean, friends, yes, but a man, especially not someone in power, it meant a lot more than I can say. And not just because you have resources or strength to help, but because you noticed me. You listened. I offered a shaky smile. Even before you knew the details, you cared enough to give me your number, to insist I take a break. That doesn't happen to people like me. People like you? He echoed, frowning. I shrugged self-consciously. Ordinary people. Girls working as waitresses, struggling with bills. We usually go unseen by guys in corner offices and penthouses. He was quiet for a moment, then. I see you, Grace. I see how hard you work, how you've been dealt a rough hand and keep playing anyway. There's nothing ordinary about that. The earnest conviction in his voice stole any reply I could have made. My throat tightened. When had I last felt truly seen? Possibly never by a man like this. I ducked my head to hide the tears that threatened. I'd cried enough for a lifetime today. Instead, I settled for another sip of chocolate and a deep breath. By the time I looked up, I'd reined in the emotions. It's been a long night, I said softly. I should probably try to sleep. Of course, Mateo agreed, standing and taking my empty mug along with his to the kitchen. Ever the gentleman, he didn't stare or ask if I'd been tearing up again. I'll be up for a while making a few calls. But you have nothing to worry about, and if you need anything at all, just call out. I believed he meant it. As I walked to the guest room, I felt a tug of reluctance. Part of me didn't want to be alone. The adrenaline had faded, and I worried the nightmares would come now, dredging up Gary's threats in the dark. But I couldn't very well ask him to, hold my hand until I fell asleep like a child. He'd already done more than enough. Yet at the doorway I lingered, turning back. Mateo was at the kitchen island, phone to his ear, speaking in a low voice I couldn't quite catch. Conducting business at near midnight, probably about Gary or other pressing issues. He caught my movement and promptly ended the call, striding over. Everything okay? I bit my lip. Would it be all right if I left the door? Just a bit open? Understanding dawned on his face. Whatever makes you comfortable. Then he surprised me. If you'd prefer, I could have someone stand guard at the front door as well. I quickly shook my head. The last thing I needed was some bodyguard hovering, making me even more anxious. No, that's okay. I trust that it's secure. It felt strange, but good to say I trusted him. The slight easing of his shoulders told me he appreciated it. Good night, Grace, he said, his voice gentle. Good night, Mateo. I left the door cracked a foot, a compromise between feeling too isolated and maintaining privacy. The bed was decadently soft, and I sank into it, physically spent. Despite exhaustion, sleep didn't come immediately. My mind replayed the night in disjointed fragments. Gary's snarling face, Mateo's hand outstretched with a handkerchief, the interior of the car, the warmth of his hand holding mine. Eventually I drifted off. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and something deliciously warm and sugary. For a second I thought I was dreaming. But then my eyes opened to golden light pouring through the windows. It took a heartbeat to place myself. The guest room, Mateo's home, safety. I found a new toothbrush by the sink and brushed my teeth, washed my face, then finger-combed my hair. The borrowed clothes from last night would have to do. I certainly wasn't about to put on my stained work uniform again. I folded the sleeves of the t-shirt and rolled the pant legs so I didn't look like a child playing dress-up. In the living area, Mateo stood by the kitchen counter plating what looked like fresh pastries. 2 white paper bags with a bakery logo sat open. He must have had breakfast brought in. He looked up at my approach and gave me that gentle half-smile that did unaccountable things to my stomach. Good morning. Hope you slept all right? I nodded, drawn by the aroma of coffee. Better than I expected, actually. Glad to hear it. He gestured to the cups. I have espresso, black coffee, and some croissants. Wasn't sure what you prefer? Croissants smell amazing. And maybe just coffee with a little milk if you have. He swiftly poured a cup from a French press and added a dash of cream from a little pitcher. I thanked him and took a sip, sighing as the rich, smooth coffee worked its way into my system. We sat at the small dining table by the window to eat. I hadn't realized how hungry I was. I devoured a flaky almond croissant in record time. For a few minutes, we just enjoyed breakfast quietly. The light of morning made everything feel more real, yet I still felt strangely at ease with him. As I finished the last bite, reality pressed at the edges of my contentment. I should probably check my phone, I said reluctantly. I had it off last night and my mom usually texts on Saturday mornings. Mateo nodded. Of course. Your phone is over there with your purse. I retrieved it and winced. Several missed calls from an unknown number, likely my landlord, i.e. Gary, before last night's confrontation, and one from the restaurant's number probably around when I left, plus a flurry of texts from Marisol. Are you okay? 11:45 p.m. Heard Gary left early and you did too? What's going on? 12:10 a.m. Call me, I'm worried. 1:05 a.m. I felt a pang of guilt. I should have told her I was safe. I quickly tapped out a response assuring her I was fine, that something happened but I'd explain later, and that she shouldn't worry. There was also a single text from a number I recognized as belonging to Chef Rossi, the head chef. Heard about Gary. Call if you need anything. That was surprising. Chef was not known for warm fuzzies, so news must have traveled among some staff. No word from Gary himself, but I doubted I'd ever get one now. I looked up to find Mateo observing me carefully. Everything all right? I nodded, just catching up. People noticed our departures. He leaned back, studying me as if deciding how much to say. They'll notice more soon. I intend to inform the staff today that Gary has been terminated for misconduct. My heart did a little leap of vindication. Terminated, that was one way to put it. Will they ask for details? Likely not in any formal sense for confidentiality. But rumors will spread. He searched my face. What would you like them to know? It's your call how much becomes gossip. I appreciated him asking. I don't really want everyone knowing specifics. Maybe just that he was harassing staff. People will fill in blanks enough. He inclined his head. Consider it done. I fiddled with my phone, then asked the question that had been nagging at me since waking. And Gary, will I ever have to worry about him again? Mateo's expression cooled, not at me, but at the thought of Gary. No, you will not. I made sure of that last night. I tried to read him. So he's alive? A trace of a smirk. Yes, in a manner of speaking. Let's just say he had an abrupt change of heart about his career and has left town permanently. I wondered if left town was a euphemism, but I decided not to dig further. I trusted that Mateo meant it when he said I'd never have to worry. That was enough for me. I let out a breath I felt I'd been holding for months. The relief was immense. I don't know how to thank you, I said softly. Mateo reached across the table, covering my hand with his. You don't owe me thanks. I'm only sorry you had to endure any of it in the first place. His hand was warm and strong over mine. Our eyes met, and in the morning light, I saw faint golden flecks in his irises that I hadn't noticed before. They were beautiful, and the concern and kindness shining in them even more so. My heart swelled with an emotion I realized was becoming dangerously close to affection. Dangerous because falling for a man like Mateo, whose life was miles removed from mine, could only end in heartbreak, right? Yet here he was, defying all my preconceived notions of what a Mafia boss, or whatever whispers said about him, would be like. I still didn't know the full extent of his business dealings, and maybe I didn't want to. I'd seen enough in movies and news to fill in blanks. Money, power, occasional violence done in shadows. But also loyalty, protectiveness for those under his wing. I remembered how Gary had instantly changed when addressing him, the fear. Mateo commanded fear and respect clearly, but he had shown me nothing but gentleness, at least when I wasn't being threatened. I recalled that lethal edge in his voice toward Gary and shivered. What's going through your mind? He asked quietly, thumb unconsciously stroking the back of my hand in slow arcs. I blushed at being caught in contemplation. Just how unexpected all this was, I admitted. Yesterday I woke up thinking it would be a day like any other. Go to clinical lab for school, then work my shift, endure whatever new hell Gary had, go home. And now, 24 hours later, everything's different. Different good or different bad. His tone was careful, but I heard a hint of vulnerability. I flipped my hand to squeeze his. Good. Scary at times, but good. He smiled, and in that smile I saw some tension release. He had been worried about what I thought of him, I realized. Worried I might view him as some sort of monster, after hearing the things he likely did to resolve this. Impulsively, I decided to be bold. I know you're probably involved in things. Beyond just restaurants, I said, choosing my words delicately. I felt his hand stiffen slightly under mine, but I hurried on. I'm not naive. Last night on the phone I heard you say not to get the police involved, so I can guess. And I'm not judging. You did what you had to keep me safe. Matteo looked at me, surprise and a touch of relief coloring his features. Most people would run the other way, knowing what you likely know about me. I gave a small shrug, summoning a half smile. Maybe I'm not most people. Or maybe it's that I owe you too much to be afraid. Either way, I'm still here. He lifted my hand and to my shock brushed a kiss across my knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, yet the feel of his lips on my skin sent a lightning bolt of awareness up my arm. I'm very glad you're here, he murmured, eyes never leaving mine. For a breathless moment, the world narrowed to just us. My heart fluttered madly, and I was sure he could feel the slight tremor in my hand he held. Then a buzzing sound shattered the moment. Matteo grimaced apologetically and released me to check his phone, which was vibrating on the table. I have to take this, he said. Give me a minute? I nodded, withdrawing my hand and trying not to feel bereft at the loss of his warmth. He stepped away to answer the call, voice low. I figured it might be work or something. I took the moment to collect myself. That almost intimate moment had heated me more than the coffee. I pressed my hands to my cheeks. Calm down, Grace. This man was just being kind, and possibly flirting, but I needed to keep my head. We had known each other less than a day. True, an intense day, but still. A slow burn, I reminded myself. Anything between us should take time to grow. Rushing into something with someone like him could be a disaster. Maybe he was just feeling protective and responsible. Not necessarily interested in that way. Yet I recalled how he said I reminded him of his sister. That might actually mean he saw me as someone to protect platonically, not romantically. The thought was oddly disappointing. I decided I should probably reach out to my mom while he was occupied. Keeping it light, I texted her. Hi, Mom, everything's fine here. Busy with work. Call tomorrow? She didn't need to know the drama. She had enough worries. A few minutes later, Matteo returned, phone back in pocket. Sorry, one of my associates. No problem, I said brightly, perhaps too brightly to cover the tension of before. So what's the plan for today? He leaned against the table, arms crossing in a casual stance. That depends largely on you. You can take the day however you want. Rest here, go out, whatever you need. If you feel up to it, I would like you to come by the restaurant later when I talk to the staff. Just so they see you're all right, and to show you have my full support. But it's not required. My stomach fluttered at the idea of facing everyone so soon. Will they know it was me I asked. No, I won't name anyone. But a few might guess or know pieces. It's your choice if you want to address anything or just let me do the talking. I thought about Marisol and Chef, who clearly knew something, maybe not details. They deserved to know the truth, but I didn't want a pity party either. I'll think about it. Of course. He then added gently, also, I took the liberty of having someone pick up some of your things from your apartment early this morning. Just essentials, clothes, personal items. I didn't want you to have to go back there until you were ready. My eyes widened. You did? I wasn't sure whether to be grateful or embarrassed that someone had gone through my place. Thank you, who? A very trusted employee of mine. And Marisol assisted to ensure the right items were taken, he explained. I believe they're in the foyer closet. The thought of Marisol being involved made me both relieved and slightly abashed. But at least it was someone I knew, and it warmed me to think she cared enough to come help gather my things. So everyone knows I was with you? I deduced. He gave a little tilt of his head. Marisol knew you left with me and didn't seem surprised when my guy approached her. I think she put two and two together when you left abruptly after what happened. I flushed, remembering the scene in the hall. Yes, she had definitely heard something. I'd have to have a heart-to-heart with her later. One more thing, Matteo said, almost hesitantly. The apartment where you lived. It's technically mine as well, part of the restaurant building. If you don't want to go back, I can have the lease voided and items moved wherever you want. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Moving out? I'd dreamed of escaping that overpriced, tiny apartment for months, but I had nowhere else lined up, and New York rents were beyond my reach without a roommate or two, and I had none in the wings. I don't know, I said honestly. I hated that place, but I can't afford anything else right now. My plan was to tough it out until I finished school and got a better job. Matteo nodded as if expecting that answer. No rush to decide. For now, consider yourself free of that lease. You can stay here or I can arrange somewhere else for you short term. Stay here? With him? My heart hopped. I can't impose. Stop, he said, raising a hand. It's not an imposition. I have more than enough room. And frankly, I'd feel better knowing you're safe under my roof while things settle. I realized his protective streak wasn't going to let me just run back to normal life immediately, and a part of me was thankful for that. The idea of returning alone to that apartment where ghosts of fear still lingered turned my stomach. Just for a little while, I conceded quietly. His shoulders relaxed. Just as long as you need. By early afternoon, we made our way back to the restaurant. Mateo insisted on having his driver take us, though I argued the distance was short and a taxi or subway was fine. He wouldn't hear it. I suppose being careful was now the order of the day, especially until it was clear Gary truly was gone for good. I caught myself scanning the streets, half expecting his glowering face in every passing car, but of course he was nowhere. At La Stella, the staff had been called in for a meeting before opening. We arrived through the back entrance. I walked in at Mateo's side, aware of the curious and concerned eyes that immediately fell on me. Marisol rushed over first and enveloped me in a hug. "Thank God," she whispered. I was so worried. I hugged her back, whispering apologies for not calling sooner. Over her shoulder, I saw Chef Rossi nodding at me, arms folded, his gruff face betraying relief. A few other servers and kitchen staff hovered, unsure. Mateo raised a hand for attention. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming in on short notice," he began. His voice carried effortlessly, full of authority yet devoid of bluster. "I'll get straight to the point. As some of you may know, Gary will no longer be managing this restaurant." A couple of stolen glances, but mostly silence. Nobody seemed inclined to lament. If anything, a weight was lifted collectively. He violated the standards I expect in my establishments, including the respect and safety every employee is entitled to, Mateo continued. "I won't tolerate harassment or abuse of anyone under my employ." I saw Marisol shoot a quick smile of vindication to another server. "They did suspect the truth then. I'll be appointing a new manager soon," Mateo went on. "In the interim, Chef Rossi and I will coordinate operations. If any of you have concerns or information regarding what transpired, my door is open." He didn't explicitly point to me, and I appreciated that. However, I felt a small push at my back, Marisol nudging me gently forward. Clearing my throat, I added, "I'm okay. And I just want to say, if anyone else ever experiences something like, well, what I did, speak up. You're not alone." My voice trembled a bit, but I saw a few nods, some teary eyes among the waitstaff. It occurred to me that perhaps others had brushed up against Gary's ugliness in lesser ways. After that, the meeting dispersed into small groups chatting. Some came up to quietly thank me or just squeeze my shoulder. The camaraderie was touching and a bit overwhelming. At one point, Chef pulled me aside. The burly man looked uncomfortable with feelings, but he managed. "You did good, kid. Don't think we didn't notice things were off. Well, I'm sorry if we didn't step in." I shook my head. "Thanks, Chef. It's all right now." His eyes flicked to Mateo, who was across the room speaking with a couple of servers about schedule changes. Chef lowered his voice. "The boss, he did right by you, eh?" Emotion swelled in me. I nodded. "Yeah, he really did." Chef grunted, satisfied, and muttered something about getting back to the kitchen to prep. When nearly everyone had filtered out to begin setting up for dinner service, or head back home if they weren't working, it was just me and Mateo left in the main dining room. The lights were still down from closed hours. The afternoon sun slanting in through front windows provided a calm glow. "How do you feel?" he asked, coming to stand beside me near table 7, the one where all this truly started. I searched myself. "Lighter," I said. "Relieved and a bit amazed." He tilted his head. "Amazed?" I managed a small laugh. That life can turn on a dime. Yesterday I was so scared and hopeless. Today, I'm free. It's just a lot to take in. He nodded slowly, then reached out to gently brush a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture froze me in place, pulse skittering. "You are free," he said, almost in a whisper, "and you have a whole life ahead of you to make exactly what you want of it." I looked up at him, at this man who had become my guardian angel in a way, albeit a dark angel perhaps. There was some invisible line between us I felt we were both carefully towing. I realized I didn't want careful distance anymore. "Mateo," I said, summoning courage from that newfound lightness in me. "What do you want? You helped me make a choice about my life. But what about yours?" He seemed taken aback. "What I want?" I stepped a fraction closer, heart pounding. "Yes, is this—" I gestured vaguely between us. "Something you want? Or was I just—" A responsibility to you? His eyes flashed with something like pain at the suggestion. Grace, you were never just a responsibility. He took my hand then, clasping it between both of his. We stood so close I felt the warmth radiating from his body. Truthfully, I have been struggling all day, trying to maintain propriety when every instinct is telling me to hold you close and never let anything hurt you again. My breath hitched. That raw confession hung between us. I'm not a good man, he continued, voice low and intense. I've done things in my life you might find unforgivable, but I promise you I would never hurt you. And I care for you, Grace, deeply. The vulnerability in his usually guarded eyes undid me. Here was a man feared by many, admitting fear of my rejection. I lifted a hand to his face, resting my palm against the firmness of his cheek. He leaned into the touch almost imperceptibly, eyes closing for a second as if starving for simple affection. I don't think you're a bad man, I whispered. I think you've done what you had to in order to survive and protect those you love. I see you, Matteo, just like you saw me. His eyes opened, and they shone with emotion now. He turned his head to press a kiss into my palm, a silent thank you, or perhaps an I can't believe what I'm hearing. The rough warmth of his lips against my hand made my heart skip. Tears pricked my eyes, but for once they were happy. And in case it wasn't clear, I added softly, I care for you too. This might be fast and crazy, but I do. A quiet sound escaped him, half groan, half sigh of relief. He slid an arm around my waist, drawing me slowly against him. I went willingly, heart thudding as his other hand rose to cradle the back of my head with gentle strength. Is this okay? He murmured, searching my gaze one more time for doubt. In reply, I rose on my toes and closed the remaining inches between us, pressing my lips to his. The kiss was tentative for barely a heartbeat, both of us unsure, trembling with anticipation. Then he responded, kissing me back with a tenderness that nearly brought tears to my eyes. He tasted of coffee and something sweet, and he kissed like a man unhurried, savoring the softness, the connection. His arm tightened around me, anchoring me to him, while his fingers wove into my damp hair. I looped my arms around his neck to steady myself as the world seemed to tilt pleasantly. I felt an overwhelming sense of safety and longing all at once. When we finally drew apart, we were both breathing a little harder, foreheads resting together. I realized I was quietly crying. A few tears had slipped free. He noticed too and brushed them away with his thumb, concern furrowing his brow. These better be happy tears, he teased gently, though his voice was huskier than usual. I laughed softly, nodding. Very happy. The smile that spread across his face was radiant, transforming his usual serious expression into something almost boyish. It struck me then how rarely he probably allowed himself moments of simple joy. You have no idea how happy that makes me, he said. Maybe I did, because it mirrored my own feelings. We lingered there in each other's arms, in the quiet afternoon hush of La Stella, where just last night, my life hung in a balance of fear. Now, that very place had become the backdrop to an entirely different scene, a beginning rather than an end. After a while, we knew we had to part, at least physically, to get on with the day. Dinner service would happen, life would move on, but everything had subtly changed. Matteo kept hold of my hand or waist whenever he was near enough, small touches that reassured us both this was real. I helped Marisol for an hour to ease the transition, though Matteo insisted I was on leave. It felt good to engage in normal activity, like clearing some shelves, but my body still thrummed with excitement and some leftover adrenaline. Eventually, he managed to pry me away, playfully ordering me with mock sternness to rest. Doctor's orders? I joked as he guided me to the car waiting out front. I can have a doctor prescribe bed rest if needed, he threatened, eyes dancing. Back at our home now, a thought that gave me secret delight, he finally relaxed more. We spent the evening cooking a simple pasta together, talking about lighter things, favorite movies. He was secretly into classic black and white films, which made me grin, my funniest customer stories, his disastrous attempts at college cooking that led to nearly burning down a dorm kitchen. It was easy, comfortable, like we'd known each other far longer. Later, as we settled on the couch to watch one of those old movies, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder, I felt a peace that had been absent from my life for years. The shadows under my world had receded, replaced by the warmth of newfound hope. Mateo pressed a kiss to my hair. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured. I snuggled closer, just thinking that if someone had told me yesterday morning that by tonight I'd be here like this, I would have called them crazy. He chuckled softly. "Fate has a strange way of intervening." I tilted my face up to him. "Do you think this is fate?" He considered that, dark eyes thoughtful but bright. "I think we crossed paths at the exact moment we both needed someone. If that's fate, then yes." Then he gave me a more serious look. "I also think fate only takes one so far. We choose what to do with it." I felt the truth of that. He'd offered help, but I'd chosen to trust him. He had likely fought an internal battle to not brush off my plight as just a passing problem. We both stepped toward each other of our own free will. "I'm choosing this," I said quietly, reaching up to caress his cheek, feeling a bit of rough stubble that had grown since morning. "I'm choosing you!" His breath hitched and he turned fully to wrap me in his arms. He didn't speak for a moment, holding me as the film played on forgotten. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear. Finally, he whispered into my hair, "And I will keep choosing you, every day." I knew life wasn't magically going to be perfect. There would be difficulties. Our worlds meshing, the moral complexities of his life, my finishing school, perhaps whispers or dangers from his line of work. But I felt in my soul that whatever came, we would face it together. He would protect me, and perhaps I could be a safe harbor for him from his storms. As the credits rolled on the movie, I smiled to myself thinking of the dramatic title I'd whimsically come up with that started all this. Mafia boss walks into his own restaurant and finds a waitress in tears. But what follows is worse. Worse, I mused aloud, catching his attention. He looked at me curiously. I smirked. That title was definitely wrong. What followed wasn't worse at all. Understanding lit his face, and he laughed softly. "No, I'd say better. Much better," I agreed. He brushed a kiss on my lips, softly, tenderly. "I promise, from here on out, I'll do everything in my power to make sure what follows is better, for both of us." I believed him with every fiber of my being. Closing my eyes, I let myself melt into the sweetness of that kiss and the strength of his arms around me, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, I wouldn't face it alone. Together, we had found something unexpected and beautiful amid the darkness, something real and worth holding on to, and that, more than anything, felt like the hopeful beginning of a new chapter neither of us had seen coming.